Welcome back to Sip and Talk. So glad you could join us today. Really great to have you with us again.
Absolutely. And hey, if you're just tuning in, maybe grab your favorite drink. Because we're about to get into a topic that, well, it just keeps popping up, keeps making headlines.
Seriously, it feels like every other week, there's a new report or a new crisis, something that just ramps up the tension. And today, we're talking about one of those things that could really send ripples everywhere. The whole situation with Iran's nuclear ambitions.
And the sort of military actions or, the threat of military actions against their facilities.
Exactly. It's huge, it's complicated, and honestly, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, why is this always a flashpoint?
Yeah.
And why should I care?
Right. Because it isn't just some far-off political thing. It's this whole web, right? International relations, global security.
And a ton of anxiety that actually hits things like, well, gas prices, supply chains, all that stuff. So that's what we're here for. We're going to try and give you a clear look, no jargon, at why this is so critical, why Iran's nuclear program is such a hot button.
And what it means for, everyone, not just folks in the Middle East.
We'll even use some everyday analogies, because let's be honest, nuclear proliferation.
Yeah.
Not exactly your typical backyard barbecue chat, is it?
Definitely not. So yeah, let's get into it. This isn't just about, explosions in politics.
It's about understanding the why behind it all, the fears, the motivations.
We're going to lay out the facts, try to cut through some of the noise, and help you really get a handle on the stakes, for global stability and all that.
Okay, so let's start with the core issue, the thing that keeps putting Iran's nuclear sites in the spotlight. It's not always about specific strikes happening right now, right? It's more the constant threat of them.
That's a really important point, yeah. The fear of direct military strikes, it's not just theoretical, it's very real.
Why? What makes these places so concerning?
Well, for years, the U.S., Israel, the international community, they've been deeply worried about Iran's nuclear goals. These aren't just, factories. They're seen as the core of something potentially really destructive.
A horribly destructive enterprise, I think I read that phrase.
Exactly. And the places that always come up are Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan.
Okay, break those down for us. Why are those the big three?
Right. So Natanz, that's like their main spot for enriching uranium. Mostly underground, to protect it. Thousands of centrifuges spinning away.
Underground? Okay. Harder to hit.
Definitely. And then Fordow, that one's even deeper, like built into a mountain near Qum.
Wow.
Yeah, super hard to target. Also for enrichment. And it's seen as really provocative because it was secret for a while, and it's so fortified.
And Esfahan, what happens there?
Isfahan is more like a tech center. They do uranium conversion, make fuel. It's not enrichment itself, but it's a crucial step before enrichment. You need it for the whole cycle.
Got it. So hitting any of these would be a major blow.
That's the objective, yeah. If there were a strike, the stated goal would be to, completely destroy or at least seriously damage Iran's ability to enrich uranium, to stop a state sponsor of terror, as the U.S. puts it, from getting the bomb.
And theoretically, how would that even work? Are we talking serious high-tech stuff? Like movie level?
Oh, it's definitely sophisticated. Think B-2 stealth bombers. Those big, creepy-looking batwing planes.
Yeah, I know the ones.
They can fly super long distances, avoid radar, carry massive bombs. We're talking like 15-ton bunker busters.
15 tons, jeez.
Yeah, the MOP Massive Ordnance Penetrator, designed specifically to go deep underground, hit hardened targets.
So like Fordow.
Exactly. The whole operation, just the logistics and the power involved. Yeah. It's a massive show of force designed to take out critical infrastructure.
Wow. Okay, so the capability is there, but is it just the U.S. with this kind of focus, or are others involved too?
Oh, absolutely not just the U.S. You have to talk about Israel here. They've been in this sort of shadow war with Iran for years. Yeah. Sometimes it gets pretty hot.
Right, I've heard that term, shadow war.
Yeah. And Israel's Air Force, for instance, has repeatedly hit Iranian targets in Syria missile sites, weapons depots. Right. Trying to stop weapons getting to groups like Hezbollah near Israel's border.
Okay, hitting them outside Iran.
But they've also reportedly gone inside Iran, covert ops targeting the nuclear program directly.
Really? Can you give examples? What kind of things have they done?
Well, it's a mix. Kinetic strikes, cyber attacks, maybe even assassinations. That centrifuge facility in Esfahan we mentioned, reports say Israel hit it maybe more than once.
And did it do much damage?
Apparently, yeah. Significant damage. Even the IAEA, the UN nuclear watchdog, acknowledged it.
Okay.
And beyond hitting facilities, there have been these high-profile killings, Revolutionary Guard commanders, nuclear scientists, and people Israel claims were key to the weapons program or arming groups like Hamas.
So it's a sustained campaign, it sounds like, trying to slow them down.
Exactly. Delay, disrupt, prevent them from regrouping quickly. That seems to be the strategy.
And how well has it worked? I mean, according to reports.
By many accounts, pretty effective. The Israeli military often reports high success rates, like shooting down nearly all of Iran's drones and missiles when they launch attacks.
Like that big attack Iran launched directly in April 2024.
Yeah, exactly. They intercepted most of those. And Israeli jets have apparently flown over parts of Iran, hitting targets. They claim to have taken out a big chunk of Iran's missile capability over time.
So air superiority seems clear.
It does. Iran's jets, like their older F-14s from way back, they're just no match for modern Israeli aircraft. It all points to this constant pressure campaign.
Okay, so there's this backdrop of ongoing conflict, direct and indirect attacks, all centered on Iran's nuclear program. But let's step back. For someone maybe new to this, why? What is it about Iran having nuclear stuff that makes everyone so nervous?
That's the fundamental question, isn't it?
Yeah, what's the big deal? Why can't Iran have this stuff if other countries do?
Okay, so the starting point is the NTT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Right, the international agreement.
Yeah. Most countries signed it. Basically says peaceful nuclear energy, fine. Nuclear weapons, absolutely not. It's the main tool we have to stop nukes from spreading everywhere.
Seems reasonable. So Iran signed it.
They did, and that's the problem. Because they've repeatedly gone against their promises big time.
How so?
Well, the first big shock was back in 2002. The world found out Iran had been secretly building nuclear sites.
Secretly? Like they didn't tell the inspectors?
Exactly. Didn't declare them to the IAEA, the inspectors. Total violation. And it wasn't just hiding things. They started enriching uranium way, way higher than you need for power plants.
Like that 60% figure you hear about.
Precisely. Weapons grade is usually around 90%, so 60%. That's getting dangerously close. And they've stockpiled hundreds of kilos of it.
Wow. And is that allowed under the rules?
Not at all. It's way over the limit set by that 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA. It basically puts them really close to breakout capability.
Breakout.
Meaning the time it would take them to make enough weapons-grade stuff for a bomb if they decided to go for it. It could be weeks or months.
Okay, so they're not just bending rules. They're building a serious weapons potential while hiding stuff. That sounds bad.
It is bad. It fundamentally challenges the whole non-proliferation system. And it gets worse. The IAEA keeps saying Iran restricts their access.
They won't let the inspectors see everything.
Right. They refuse to answer questions about undeclared nuclear material they found traces of. They basically keep the world guessing about key parts of the program.
So no transparency.
Almost none in critical areas. And that lack of transparency, plus the high enrichment, plus the history of secrecy, it just destroys trust. Makes it impossible to verify their claims that it's all peaceful. It's a huge red flag.
Okay, let's try that hand grenade analogy you mentioned. How does that fit here?
It fits perfectly. Think about it. You wouldn't just hand a live grenade to anyone, right?
No, definitely not.
You'd want it with someone trained, accountable, supervised, someone who understands the danger and follows strict rules. Like a soldier, maybe?
Okay, makes sense.
So when we think about countries like the US, UK, France, even Israel, though unofficially, having nukes, the argument is they're in the hands of systems with checks and balances.
Like parliamentary oversight, public debate, military protocols. It's hard for one person to just push the button.
Exactly. There are layers of control. Imperfect, maybe, but designed to prevent impulsive or rogue actions. It promotes a certain kind of stability, even with these awful weapons.
But with Iran, the worry is different.
The worry is that it's like giving that grenade to someone. Well, someone who expresses extreme ideologies, talks about revenge, seems unpredictable.
And it's a theocracy, right? The supreme leader has the final say.
Pretty much. Ayatollah Khamenei. There aren't those same democratic checks. No truly free press. No independent parliament strong enough to stop him if he made a drastic decision. That concentration of power with that kind of ideology, that's what's terrifying.
The lack of accountability. Okay. What about the other analogy? The apartment manager versus the arson suspect.
Ah, yeah, I like that one too. It highlights the trust issue.
Lay it on us.
Okay. Imagine your apartment building. The manager holds fire drills, checks the sprinklers, lets you see the fire extinguishers are working. You basically trust them with matches, right? They show responsibility.
Yeah. generally. They seem to care about safety.
That's kind of like the established nuclear powers, arguably. They operate within a system. There's some oversight, even if it's debated.
But then there's Iran.
The arson suspect.
Metaphorically speaking, yeah. They've been accused of starting fires in the neighborhood, funding Hamas, the Houthis, groups that cause chaos and violence.
Right, the proxy groups.
Exactly. So now, this actor with that history says, hey, give us these special high-tech matches, meaning nuclear capability. We promise we won't misuse them.
Yeah, harder to believe. It's very hard to believe, especially when they're also caught, teaching neighbors how to light fires by supporting those proxies. It makes the just for self-defense claim ring pretty hollow.
So it really boils down to who has the weapon, what kind of system they operate under, and their past actions. Context is everything.
Precisely. And that context is why the world is so deeply concerned about Iran getting closer to a bomb.
Okay, so let's play that out. Hypothetically, if Iran did cross the line, actually built a bomb, what happens next door? What's the immediate fallout in the Middle East?
This is where it gets really scary, frankly. If Iran gets nukes, the fear, the near certainty, is it triggers a nuclear arms race across the region.
Like everybody suddenly wants one.
Pretty much. It's that if they have it, we must have it too. Logic.
Right.
Driven by rivalry, fear, religion, all of it.
Domino effect.
Exactly. And that's a nightmare for global stability. Because if Iran, an NPT signatory that broke the rules, gets away with it, it sends a terrible message.
Well, what message?
That the treaty is toothless. That if you cheat and wait long enough, you can get nukes too. It could unravel decades of effort to stop nuclear spread.
So who's watching this most closely? Who in the region is likely to say, okay, time for us to get nukes too?
Saudi Arabia is number one on that list. Their crown prince, MBS, said it very clearly back in 2018. If Iran develops a nuclear weapon, we will follow suit.
He actually said that.
Yep. And it wasn't just talk. They've been talking to the U.S. about their own peaceful nuclear program, one that includes enriching uranium domestically.
Enriching uranium. That's the key step towards weapons capability, right?
It absolutely is. And there were reports the U.S. was hesitant about giving them too much tech because, how do you stop them later if they decide to go military? It shows real intent.
Okay, so Saudi Arabia is serious. Who else?
Well, then there's Israel. Widely believed to have nuclear weapons already, maybe 80 or 90, though they never confirm or deny it.
The policy of ambiguity.
Right. But for them, a nuclear Iran isn't just a threat. It's existential. It's about survival. They've already been hitting Iran's program indirectly. Imagine the pressure if Iran actually had the bomb. Would Israel launch a preemptive strike? It's a terrifying possibility.
A real nail-biter situation. High-stakes poker, like you said.
Totally. And for other Sunni countries like Saudi Arabia or the UAE, a nuclear Iran, a Shia power, completely shifts the regional balance. It becomes this desperate need to counter them. A chain reaction.
So everyone lines up. UAE, Qatar, others.
Maybe not everyone immediately jumps to build their own. The UAE and Qatar, for instance, have been more focused on diplomacy, de-escalation. They might rely on U.S. security guarantees instead.
Building nukes is hard, right?
Yeah.
Expensive.
Incredibly hard and expensive. Saudi Arabia, for example, doesn't really have the industrial base to just whip up a nuclear weapons program. They'd likely need outside help.
Like from who?
Maybe China, maybe Pakistan, which just adds another layer of complexity and proliferation risk. Spreading that knowledge, that technology.
Okay, so maybe I'm sitting here thinking, all right, that's a mess over there, but why is it my problem? Why should someone in, say, Ohio or France panic about this?
Because it absolutely doesn't stay contained. If Iran gets nukes, then Saudi Arabia, maybe Turkey, maybe Egypt, you suddenly have a Middle East filled with nuclear powers, a multi-country nuclear club.
Which sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It is. Think about the instability in the region. What if one of these regimes collapses, like Libya or Syria? Where do those nukes go?
Into the wrong hands, terrorist groups.
That's the ultimate nightmare, a loose nuke in that region. Unthinkable. Plus, the risk of actual war skyrockets.
How so?
Well, if Israel strikes preemptively or Iran retaliates against U.S. bases, you could have a massive Middle East war.
And the global impact.
Huge. Oil prices would go through the roof. Global economy takes a massive hit. Shipping lanes, like the Red Sea, get shut down. Supply chains everywhere disrupted. It affects everyone, everywhere. Very real consequences.
So this anxiety isn't just abstract fear. It's driving real policy decisions.
Absolutely. Very tangible fears across the globe.
Now, we hear these extreme statements from Iran, like, wipe Israel off the map. Is that just rhetoric, you think? Or do we need to take it seriously?
That's a critical question. Is it just posturing, or is there real intent behind it?
Yeah, what's the reality?
The reality is, it seems pretty real. The supreme leader, Khamenei, the Revolutionary Guard, they consistently use language like, Israel must be erased, calling it a cancerous tumor.
That's strong language.
Is incredibly strong. And Khamenei has publicly called for Israel's destruction multiple times. It seems baked into their ideology, not just political slogans. That kind of dehumanizing talk often precedes action.
But they don't always attack directly, like we discussed. They use these proxy groups.
Exactly. Iran is, you could say, a master of proxy warfare. Fund, train, arm these groups. Let them do the fighting indirectly.
Which lets Iran deny responsibility.
Precisely. While still projecting power, causing chaos, achieving their goals, it's clever in a very dangerous way.
Remind us who these main proxy groups are again.
Okay, the big ones. Hezbollah in Lebanon, right on Israel's border, very powerful. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, in Gaza, getting lots of Iranian support.
Even though they're Sunni.
Yeah, it's about strategic alignment against common enemies there. Then the Houthis in Yemen attacking ships in Saudi Arabia, and lots of pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria hitting U.S. bases.
So they've built this whole network.
A network, yeah. Sometimes called the Shiite crescent of influence, stretching across the region.
And this isn't just theoretical conflict. People have actually been hurt or killed by these Iranian-backed actions, right? U.S. personnel. Israelis.
Absolutely. Real harm, real casualties. For the U.S., remember back in 2020, after the Soleimani strike, Iran fired missiles at the Ain al-Assad base in Iraq.
Right, I remember that.
No U.S. deaths, thankfully, but over 100 troops got traumatic brain injuries. That's significant. And more recently, the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea, backed by Iran. They've injured U.S. sailors, disrupted global shipping massively.
And for Israel.
The October 7th Hamas attack in 2023. Horrific. Over 1,200 Israeli civilians killed. Children, elderly. Just brutal.
Iran's role there.
U.S. and Israeli intelligence agree Iran provided money, training, strategic support. They might not have ordered that specific attack on that day, but they enabled it.
Okay. And then Iran attacked Israel directly too, didn't they?
Yes, April 13th, 2024. First time ever from Iranian soil. Around 300 missiles and drones. Most were intercepted, but it was a huge escalation, a real game changer. Showed they were willing to risk direct war.
So the threat is definitely not just words. What's the ultimate goal here for Iran? What are they trying to achieve with all this?
It seems to be a few things. One, regional dominance, building that crescent, pushing out rivals like the U.S. and Saudi Arabia.
Okay. What else?
Internal legitimacy. Using the resistance against America and Israel narrative helps justify the regime to its own people, distracts from problems at home.
And third?
Leverage. Especially in nuclear talks, they use these military threats, the regional instability they cause, as bargaining chips. Stop the sanctions, give us concessions, or things get worse.
Play hardball, basically.
Exactly.
Now, you mentioned Israel uses surgical strikes, but Iran and its proxies, they seem to hit civilian areas a lot. Why the difference? Is it just technology or is it strategy?
It seems to be both, and it's a really stark contrast. Israel claims to aim for precision, hitting military targets, weapon sites, commanders, rocket launchers, using advanced tech to minimize, theoretically, civilian harm.
They use things like cyber attacks too, right? Like Stuxnet.
Yeah, Stuxnet against Natanz, or those reported assassinations using remote-controlled weapons. Methods designed to avoid large-scale bombing and collateral damage, they argue, though, of course, civilians still tragically get caught in the crossfire.
But Iran and the proxies.
Often they use less sophisticated weapons, unguided rockets, basic drones. They don't have the same precision capability, so whether by design or limitation, they often fire indiscriminately toward cities.
Indiscriminately, like just aiming in the general direction.
Pretty much. And worse, they've been widely accused of using civilians as human shields, putting rocket launchers or command centers in residential buildings, near schools, hospitals.
Why would they do that?
It makes it incredibly difficult for Israel to strike back without causing civilian casualties. Then they can use those casualties for propaganda to condemn Israel internationally. It's a cynical, brutal tactic.
That's horrifying. Can you give examples of this indiscriminate fire?
Well, the October 7th attack itself involved thousands of rockets fired blindly into Israeli towns and cities. And remember the Al-Ala hospital explosion in Gaza.
Yeah, that was terrible. Hundreds died.
Hamas immediately blamed Israel. But later analysis, including from U.S. intelligence, strongly suggested it was actually a misfired rocket from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another Gaza group. It shows the danger of firing rockets from dense urban areas.
Okay. And more recently?
There was that reported Iranian missile strike on Soroka Hospital in Beersheba, Israel. Caused a fire, injured dozens, mostly civilians, staff.
Hitting a hospital. That's a war crime, isn't it?
Under international law, yes. Deliberately targeting a hospital is a grave violation. Israel called it deliberate.
And Iran launched other big attacks, too.
Yeah, that Operation True Promise III, they called it. Over 150 missiles, 100 drones, hitting Tel Aviv, Haifa, other cities. Israel reported significant casualties, including civilians.
So it seems like a pattern. Israel aiming, however imperfectly, at military targets, while Iran and proxies often hit civilians, either intentionally or because they lack precision and use human shields.
That's the assessment of many observers, yes. Israel focuses on suppressing the threat. Iran and its proxies often seem to focus on terror and retaliation, and that difference dramatically raises the stakes.
Okay, so given this whole picture, the nuclear violations, the proxies, the direct attacks, what's the U.S. stance, specifically under, say, recent leadership like President Trump, who was in office in this hypothetical 2025 scenario?
Well, U.S. leadership generally keeps saying all options are on the table to stop Iran getting a nuke. That includes military force.
So Trump, in this scenario, would likely be talking tough.
Very likely, yes. The outline mentioned him getting briefings, setting deadlines for Iran to wake up. That fits the pattern.
And there was that mention of him disagreeing with his intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard, about whether Iran was actively seeking nukes right now.
Right, though she apparently clarified later, said the media twisted her words. Her point, and the general U.S. intelligence assessment, seems to be that Iran can produce weapons material very quickly, weeks or months, and has huge stockpiles of enriched uranium. So the capability is undeniable, even if the final decision to build a weapon hasn't been confirmed.
So bottom line, the intel points to a serious, imminent threat capability.
Precisely. And while there's military pressure, there's also diplomacy. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, in this scenario, reportedly told Europe the U.S. is ready for direct talks anytime.
Okay, what about Europe? What's their angle?
Europe especially, France, Germany, UK, the E3, they're really pushing for negotiation. Comprehensive talks?
Covering what? Just the nukes?
Yeah. No, everything. Nukes, missiles, the proxy funding, even detained citizens. They want a big package deal.
What's their main goal? Avoid war.
Absolutely. Stop military action. Stabilize the region through diplomacy. Their big aim is zero enrichment for Iran. Get them completely back in line with the NPT.
But you said Iran's been ignoring the rules?
Exactly. Iran's been upgrading its program, blowing past the limits of the old deal. That makes Europe's job incredibly hard.
And Iran's response to these diplomatic offers?
Often it's preconditions. We won't talk while Israel attacks, or we won't talk until sanctions are lifted. It creates a stalemate. They use their nuclear progress as leverage.
So it's this complex dance. U.S. pressure, European diplomacy, Iranian stalling, anyone else involved?
Oh, yeah. Big players. Russia and China.
What's their take?
Generally, they don't want Iran attacked. A strong, defiant Iran, even a nuclear-capable one, it can serve as a counterweight to U.S. influence in the Middle East.
So they see Iran as strategically useful against the U.S.
It seems that way. It fits their goal of challenging U.S. dominance, creating a more multipolar world. It's all part of a much bigger geopolitical game.
Wow. There was even that weird detail about Russian scientists in Iran maybe having safety deals with Israel?
Yeah, unconfirmed reports, but it shows how weird and layered these relationships can get. Even adversaries might have very specific overlapping interests sometimes.
So Russia and China are playing their own game, using Iran.
Seems like it. And it leads to a tough point some analysts make. When you face a potential nuclear threat, maybe debates about double standards become secondary.
What do you mean?
Like, ideally, no one has nukes, but if they exist, maybe the least bad scenario is having them in the hands of countries aligned with, stability and international norms, rather than regimes seen as hostile or unpredictable. It's pragmatic, maybe cynical, but reflects nuclear reality.
A high-stakes poker game indeed. Everyone trying to manage risk and gain advantage.
Exactly. So circling back to why Iran can't have nukes, it's not just a simple double standard. It's about who has the weapon and what kind of system they operate under.
Right. Context matters. Trust, accountability, past behavior.
All of it. And thinking about that context, It leads us to what many experts see as the three most dangerous nuclear powers right now. Not necessarily the ones with the most bombs, but the ones whose possession of them is most worrying.
Okay, who are they, besides the Iran situation we've been discussing?
China, Russia, and North Korea.
Why those three? What makes them stand out? You mentioned triple nuclear disaster conditions.
Yes, they share this dangerous combination of factors. First, they're all authoritarian regimes.
One person or a small group calls all the shots.
Right. Power is incredibly concentrated, no real democratic checks, no free press, no independent courts to push back. If the leader, Putin, Xi, Kim, gets emotional, miscalculates, they could potentially order a launch without the hurdles you'd see elsewhere.
Unlike the West, where it takes multiple steps, multiple people.
Precisely. The system itself is different. In these three countries, one order might be enough. That's a huge risk factor.
Okay, that's the first condition. What's the second?
Second, they're all highly aggressive militarily with expansionist tendencies. They don't just seem to want nukes for defense. They use them to threaten and coerce.
Examples.
Russia invaded Ukraine, openly talks about using nukes, put tactical nukes in Belarus, treats them like just another tool.
Rapidly building up its arsenal, aiming for over 1,000 warheads. Constant military drills threatening Taiwan, pushing boundaries in the South China Sea. Their policy is deliberately unclear.
Constantly testing missiles, threatening South Korea, Japan, even the U.S. mainland. Kim Jong-un is totally unpredictable, uses tests to demand concessions.
So they're actively using the nuclear threat for offense, not just defense.
That's the major concern. And third, they operate without transparency and mostly outside international rules. They largely reject serious IAEA supervision. North Korea just walked out of the NPT altogether. And they have this history of fake negotiations, real development, pretend to talk while secretly building up their capabilities.
Okay, so authoritarianism, aggression, and lack of transparency. Those are the three conditions.
Yep, and when you put them together, the conclusion some reach is terrifying. It's not that they can't use nukes, it's that there's less stopping them, fewer reasons not to compared to other nuclear states, and the world has very little leverage to actually prevent them if they decide to. That's the scary part.
Let's revisit the matches analogy one last time. How do these three fit?
Okay, so U.S. nukes are like locked in a super secure bank vault. Takes multiple keys, multiple people, strict procedure.
Like layers of safety. Russia.
Russia's nukes, they feel like they're just sitting on the kitchen table. And Putin's nearby, maybe looking at them, maybe thinking about using them. There's a casualness to the threat.
Okay. China.
China's nukes are hidden deep in the basement. Very secretive. You don't know exactly how many there are or when they might suddenly decide to bring them upstairs. Lots of ambiguity.
And North Korea.
North Korea's nukes are like, well, like they're being waved around by an unpredictable kid having a tantrum, making wild threats just to get attention or, more candy, highly volatile.
That really paints a picture. It's not just about having the matches. It's about who's holding them and why. Really makes you think differently about global security.
Absolutely. It's complicated, heavy stuff. But understanding why these things happen, why the U.S. might strike Iran, why these other countries are such a concern, it's crucial. It helps you think critically.
Totally agree. It's serious. But staying informed helps make sense of it all. So, take these ideas, think about them, keep asking questions. Your understanding really matters.
And that's what we try to do here at Sip&Talk, right? Help you sip on some knowledge, talk about the big issues without getting lost in the noise. Hope this discussion gave you some clarity.
Yeah, hope so too. Before we wrap up, massive thanks for joining us for this talk about the global nuclear picture. If you found it useful, definitely hit subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Helps us out a lot.
And hey, you should definitely check out our good friend Mickey's YouTube channel. He does awesome memes, great music stuff, wine tasting, which is always fun, and these really cool travel vlogs. Seriously, it's great stuff. A nice break from all this heavy news. Go check it out.
You won't regret it. All right, for both of us here, thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you next time.